Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening and giving us your time. We're really excited to have all of you and your brilliant campaigns and organisations in the room, as it were, this evening, because you're all doing fantastic work on combating street harassment and public sexual harassment. So thank you for joining us. My name's Emily. I'm a volunteer with the Lambeth branch of the Women's Equality Party. Our branch has been campaigning since last summer on the issue of street harassment in our borough and in London, trying to make a change on the issue at a local level, but we also think there's lots that can be done at a national level through changing laws on things like misogyny as a hate crime, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk about some of that stuff. But we think it's important to kind of shine a light on all the campaigns that are trying to make a change on this issue, which affects the lives and well-being of so many women and girls every day. And not just women and girls, it's a really intersectional issue as well that affects a lot of people. So we've been doing a week of action, and to round it off, we wanted to hear from some of the campaigns and organisers who are working in the area. So we put together this brilliant panel to talk about the issue and what we can all be doing to address it. I'd like to just go around and ask each of you to introduce yourselves and your campaign and tell us a little bit about, I guess, what the issue of public sexual harassment means to you. Are we all right to start off with Ellen?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ellen and I work for Our Streets Now, which is a nationwide grassroots youth-led movement to end public sexual harassment through cultural as well as legislative change. It was started by Maya and Gemma Tutton in 2019, and our petition to make PSH a specific criminal offence has got over 200,000 signatures so far. So it's doing really well because we're sort of both from OSM. I'll pass the next bit of the question on to Helena.
Brilliant, thank you.
I'm Helena. I'm the other education lead from Our Streets Now. In terms of what PSH means to us and to organization, Our Streets Now has sort of coined this term public sexual harassment to more accurately capture the gender-based violence that it is, rather than catcalling or, wolf whistling that could be sort of quite dismissing or patronizing even. So yeah, in our understanding, it's any unwanted sexual attention or intimidating behavior that can occur, anything from parks to buses to, what I and Ellen work on, which is university campuses.
Thank you so much, Helena. I really want to come on to talking about higher education. Thank you for raising that already. Cait, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Cait. I am the co-founder of Visible Platform. Visible Platform is a web-based platform for reporting all instances of sexual harassment on the London Underground, Overground or the DLR. And we collect all instances, past or present, major instances down to what you might consider the most minor incident to be. And our definition of public sexual harassment is quite similar to Our Streets Now. We just believe any behaviour that is done for sexual gratification to a non-consenting person or behaviours of sexual intimidation in public to be public sexual harassment.
Thank you. Which might make quite a natural transition then to DCI Sarah White.
Yeah, good evening. So it's DCI Sarah White from the British Transport Police. Thanks for the invite this evening. It's hugely beneficial. I'm really excited actually to see that there's so many organisations and charities and campaigns running against this issue. Transport Police take any form of sexual behaviour very seriously, whether that be unwanted sexual behaviour. We sort of regard as those incidents that don't meet the threshold test for a sexual offence, for a crime. We encourage individuals, passengers, rail staff to report as many incidents as they can through to us. We've got a very limited understanding at the moment of what unwanted sexual behaviour looks like. We are well aware that it's highly underreported and we're encouraging reporting, but as per many of the individuals already spoken, for us it's anything at all, however minor one may consider. But if you're finding it uncomfortable, even as a witness to an incident, and the chances are that somebody else is finding it uncomfortable. And my plea is that people get in touch with the Transport Police, and I can provide those details as we work through the panel. But let us know about this information and we can work to combat it.
Thank you. And finally, Eliza.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Eliza Hatch. I'm a photographer, an activist and founder of the photo campaign Cheer Up Love, which is a campaign dedicated to retelling stories of sexual harassment through photography. I'm also the host of the Cheer Up Love podcast, which is a podcast dedicated to busting myths surrounding sexual assault and sexual harassment. The way my campaign works is by going back to the place that sexual harassment took place and using it as a stage to speak out on and take the photo and reclaim the space, and then I publish everything on my Instagram, which encourages more people to come forward and share their stories.
Fantastic. So I'm sure everyone watching will be as excited as we are about having all of you in the same room. So yeah, thank you again for being here. Eliza, if we can stay with you for a minute, I wanted to ask you a question about, I suppose, the experience of street harassment and public sexual harassment generally. I imagine we've all experienced it. What a lot of these campaigns and organisations have in common is kind of trying to get women and girls talking about those experiences and sharing their stories. You've collaborated with so many women who have different stories, and so I was just wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about, I guess, the role of photography in your campaigning, and also whether there are any patterns, kind of similarities that you see coming through in some of the different stories that you've heard as part of your work.
Yeah, sure. So I decided to use photography as a medium to tell stories because I come from an artistic background, and I wanted to find a way to communicate this issue that I felt really passionately about, but in a way that I could understand, in a way that I could try and also communicate the issue to other people in my life who maybe didn't understand what was going on because they hadn't had a lived experience of it. They hadn't seen it happening, they didn't understand the scale of the issue. So I was inspired to start doing what I do because of a conversation that I had with a few of my male friends around 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago now, when I was sharing some personal experiences of sexual harassment in a group of my friends, and they just couldn't really believe what they were hearing. They were dismissing and diminishing our experience and saying these things were just misguided compliments and attempts of flattery, and that we should be, we shouldn't be so sensitive, and that they don't see this kind of stuff happening on the streets and they aren't the ones doing it themselves. So they basically just thought that we were exaggerating the issue. And so I started taking photographs of my friends around 4 years ago in the place that they experienced harassment, because I just wanted to physically connect the dots. I wanted to place the woman in that public setting, like a bus stop, a train station, a platform, a busy street, and have her looking straight down the camera at you, and looking directly into your eyes, standing there and saying, this is what I've experienced, and I've experienced it right here. And I wanted to make that connection and kind of make the issue less abstract, and have my friends, the ones who didn't believe me at first, look at these photos and be able to recognise that place, recognise that bus, recognise that tube station, and actually maybe be convinced that this was something that was actually happening and actually affecting a lot of people. And I didn't realise the effect that it would really have at that stage. When I was doing it initially, I was almost trying to prove a point, and I was just trying to prove them wrong. The only thing I was trying to do was like raise awareness of the issue, but the more and more I've been doing it, the more I've realised that it's not just about raising awareness, it's not just about proving a point, it's about giving survivors a platform. It's about encouraging women and non-binary people to speak out about this issue. Ultimately, it's about creating solidarity in a safe space where people can share their stories and encourage others to speak out.
Thank you, and you've certainly achieved that. Your project has been so successful, and it's been such an inspiration to us, so that's really interesting to hear about the origins of it. The issue about the bus stops and just the places that we go every day, I think that's really important. Thinking about the work that Our Streets Now is doing in higher education and those kinds of institutions, those kinds of environments where these things do happen. Helena, do you want to, or Ellen, either one of you, tell us a little bit about, I guess, the experience of harassment in higher education on university campuses and in those sorts of spaces?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So we actually did some research before we started with our sort of higher education scheme, or whatever you want to call it. And we found that 84% of students had experienced this form of harassment, and women and non-binary students, a total of 49%. Attached to that, I think, is the work that unis need to be doing, or higher education institutions, is to recognize this as a common part of the student life, and it needs to be challenged. And I think higher education institutions need to do a better job of supporting their students, because they often dismiss it as an issue that it goes beyond campus borders. The well-being of their students and the student life does go beyond campus border, whether going to football training on a student night out, sports night, whatever it is, that is all part of the student experience that goes beyond the campus borders. Unfortunately, it's a common part of the student experience, and it needs to be recognized as such.
And do you think it's a different kind of experience for young women, perhaps? Do young women experience harassment more, in a more extreme way? What do you think, Ellen?
I think in the moment, the actual experience, the fear and the intimidation you feel doesn't differ, but obviously the context is different. So when you go to university, it's sort of the first time that you're experiencing the world in a completely autonomous and independent way. Often you have sort of a lack of a really solid support network when you first go to university. You're only just making new friends, you're getting to grips with university life, moving away from your family. Perhaps the harassment in itself isn't sort of different, but the reaction and impacts of the harassment definitely are. As Helena said, they can really shape your whole higher education experience and make you miss out on sort of social opportunities, but also learning opportunities. And it can have a massive impact on your mental health and your academic performance as well.
Absolutely, thank you. And Cait, the place that you're thinking about is transportation, London Underground and Overground and DLR. Why is that a good place to sort of start the conversation around harassment? What is it about that space for you?
Well, my co-founder and I founded Visible Platform just through our own experience of public transport. It wasn't planned, and we just began talking. My co-founder had experience and she shared it with me, and then I had a story, and then the more we talked to friends and family and colleagues, they all had such similar stories. Again, like nobody was like sharing them beyond their friends, and nobody was reporting them. There's so many stories that are going unaccounted for, and something that's at the heart of Visible Platform is the gender data gap. So for us, transport is a really good place to start because it's a very concentrated area, and because we want to have really coherent, strong data sets to be like, look, this is how many women it happens to, this is how many women it has happened to, and how often it happens, and all these things, obviously pre-COVID. Because we wanted to have a good data set, we were like, okay, well, it's better to have a very specific area. So for that reason, we started on public transport, because we also know that women are such frequent users of public transport and use so many forms of public transport. It's where your public life begins first thing in the morning if you're trying to get to school or to work, or you're taking your child to nursery, or you're going to care for, your mother or something. So we wanted to actually be something that impact a woman's life. So that's why we decided to start with public transport. But obviously, once you get off the tube, it continues.
Absolutely. And that's interesting. You're right. These things, they bleed into each other, don't they? Because when we started our campaign, we were thinking a lot about street harassment, because that's what Annika and Christina and Liv and I had experienced. But as soon as you start thinking about it, it's like, well, where does it stop being street harassment and start being harassment on the bus, or start being harassment in a park? And, whose responsibility does that become to deal with it? And all of these different settings that we move through are all places that we need to think about. And the issues that you just brought up around data, reporting, knowing what's happening on transport. I mean, this speaks perfectly to exactly what Sarah is trying to achieve at British Transport Police. So Sarah, can I ask you to just tell us a little bit more about BTP and your stance on reporting? If someone's experienced unwanted sexual behaviour or harassment, what should they do? What can they expect?
Certainly. I mean, I think a lot of the points that have been raised already around people's perceptions around USB is exactly what I've experienced in the research that I've completed. Some people seem to normalise and believe that that sort of behaviour is acceptable. It's absolutely not. Innovatively this year, Transport Police are doing something very different, and we're starting to record now that unwanted sexual behaviour. Historically, police forces never have. We've only ever looked at sexual offences. I think across the board and nationally, it's now becoming a lot more recognised, as it should be. Historically, the amount of people that we have reporting it is very low, between 4 and 7% of individuals that have suffered some sort of unwanted sexual behaviour actually tell the police. That's a crazy amount. That for me, that leaves 93 to 96% of the people that have suffered that we're not helping as victims as well. We're not able to signpost them, etc. So again, please do tell us. We've got a lot of campaigns running at the moment. We've got a lot of new systems up and running. We've got the online reporting form, which can be done across the internet at btp.police.uk. And we've got the text number, the 61016 text number, which we've had some amazing results with from young ladies and young men who've reported incidents as they're happening using the text service, which means that it doesn't necessarily stand out and advise any perpetrator that that's what they're doing. Request police will answer, will respond where possible, and we've had some great results where we've intercepted some behaviours and made really good arrests as a result of the simple text message telling us about them feeling uncomfortable and what's happening. I honestly can't encourage it enough. I think that there's many blockers and many reasons why individuals don't report, and I understand that, whether that's emotional, some people just want to move on from it, or whether there's more meaningful sort of different blockers. But either way, the common theme throughout the whole thing is that people aren't often wanting to tell us their identity. So we're now working with the National Police Chief Council and the Road Delivery Group to form a confidential reporting line, which allows individuals to tell us exactly what's happening on without that responsibility or concern that they may have about being involved in the justice system, yet gathering the intelligence that we need to stop perpetrators and deal with people appropriately. But also, we're then able to signpost these individuals and say, look, here's the help you might need, or the support you might need. Because it must feel dreadful if you feel you're on your own, you've got no one to report it to. It's just a horrendous situation to be in. So we are doing our best to improve understanding of the issue and subsequently our response to it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear that all that work is happening. The text number that you mentioned, 61016, I think I mentioned to you, I had no idea until we spoke that you could use that to report harassment on the transport network. So that's a really important thing for people to take away and store, isn't it?
People think it's very much terrorism linked. I mean, it is. It's very useful for any type of crime. But if you're in a situation where you're feeling very vulnerable or you're in fear, then absolutely dial 999, no question about it. If it's an urgent response you need, of course, use that system. But 61016 is a really good system that allows you to do things really discreetly. You'll always get a response from the force, and quite often you'll get a physical presence as well.
Thank you. Good to know.
Yeah.
I think it'd be nice to talk a little bit about what needs to be done to move forward from here. If I can kind of come back to Our Streets Now, again, either Ellen or Helena, whoever wants to field the question. What do you think could or should be done in higher education institutions? I know you're launching some campaigning around this at the moment. Can you tell us about what you think needs to happen?
Sure, I can go first, then Ellen can go in. As I touched on a bit earlier, I think universities too often dismiss it as an issue that is only beyond the campus borders, and they need to recognize that they have the power and ability to work with other organizations to ensure that student well-being and all the other parts that make up student life is free of public sexual harassment. This week we have launched our higher education scheme. There's many elements, but we want to work on an institutional level, so ensuring that policies are in place and that universities have a zero tolerance to any form of harassment. But also we want to work on the cultural side, because against any university policy is only as good as the work being done in real life. And then those words translate into student culture, also into staff and academic staff in responding to students coming forward with experiences of harassment and providing that support. Because as Ellen touched on earlier, the effects on student mental health, academic performance, all of these things are there. And it's not enough to just punish the perpetrator. There needs to be support to people coming forward as well. Part of our higher education scheme, we have an ambassador project that I'm going to leave this to Ellen.
Yeah, so looking at the survey and seeing sort of key clear demands from students and ask, we developed this ambassador program, which we've now got up and running in 17 universities, which is really exciting, with 30 ambassadors. So it sort of aims to provide direct and targeted action at every 18 institution we work in, because obviously different institutions have different policies. We need to sort of look at them individually as well as more generally, utilising the knowledge of the student ambassadors. They've been in those institutions maybe for a year, 2 years. They know how they work. They're best placed to sort of put in these changes and facilitate these positive changes that we hope will happen, that Helena mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that scheme. Eliza, you've taken your campaign global now. Have you got any insights from some of the people that you've spoken to about how other countries and communities are grappling with the issue? Anything that we can learn from, perhaps?
Yeah, so I've taken the campaign to the US, to Mexico, to Japan, and Sri Lanka, which was a campaign I did with the United Nations Population Fund. And there's lots of different methods. In some cases, the issue of sexual harassment hasn't really been addressed yet. It's just like literally starting that conversation, which was what we were trying to do in Sri Lanka, for instance, because they have an issue of 90% of women experience sexual harassment on public transport, with only 4% ever reporting it to the authorities. And this was just an issue that wasn't really being spoken about, wasn't really being addressed at the time. There certainly weren't any solutions happening. So we were on the ground there to just raise awareness about this and to get the initiatives off the ground. So when we did the campaign there, for instance, we set up a week of events for International Women's Day in 2019, where we had bystander intervention classes, and we spoke to school children, and we rounded up a bunch of like 100 bus conductors and gave them workshops about how to spot, see and intervene when you see sexual harassment happening in public transport. So yeah, there were lots of different initiatives that we're doing over there. There's still plenty more that needs to be done. It does feel like in some senses we are just at the beginning of that. But yeah, it's been super interesting to see how different countries are approaching that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that must have been an amazing experience. Sarah, I know you've got a campaign coming up about addressing unwanted sexual behaviours. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done and what's coming up that we can look out for?
Yeah, certainly. So I've mentioned the confidential reporting system that we're working on at the moment. Not going to be launched, unfortunately. Technology takes longer than I would like, so probably not till next year. But in the meantime, we're working with Crime Stoppers and again the Rail Delivery Group, and we've got a really exciting campaign starting over the next few months to encourage people to report again through their system. So that's an intelligence system that comes through to us. Again, it can be a confidential system that allows individuals to call up and report. So that you should see a fair amount of publicity around the Crime Stoppers campaign going forward, which is excellent. But some of the work that was just spoken about then in relation to talking to the bus drivers sounds phenomenal. And actually, we're mirroring that with the rail staff. We're well aware that there's more that staff and members of public in general can probably do to deter, without putting themselves at risk, to deter or deflect some of the behaviours. So we're doing quite a lot of work around that internally from an organisational perspective and working with our railway partners. So if there's anything that any of the organisations think that we can contribute or assist with, then please do say, because I'm all for innovative ideas for learning and coming up with new solutions. So there's clearly some fantastic work going on across universities and other countries. So really exciting to hear.
I've only got a couple more questions. My last one's for Cait, and then I'm going to open it up to everyone. Cait, you've got this platform where people can report recent or historic experiences they've had on the transport network. What types of harassment are you seeing that maybe might be different to what's happening on the street, that might need a different response because it's happening on transport?
Yeah, so what we see a lot is women dismissing their own experiences because they're not sure if they really happened. And I think that might be slightly different from street harassment in that normally you can tell, somebody's definitely catcalled you or somebody has purposely come up and grabbed you or something like that. But when you're on a packed tube at rush hour and you think somebody's hand is on you, but you don't want to draw attention to it, or you're not 100% sure, or if you're going up an escalator and somebody shouts something, you think, did they shout that at me? Did they shout it at the person in front of me? Like, that's what I'm wearing, but maybe they meant that person. So we get a lot of women and girls telling us, like, I'm not sure, but I think this happened. And we always say, well, like, if it made you feel that way, if you felt like it was directed at you, then that is a real incident because your experience counts. I think something that's quite different is obviously because somewhere like a tube carriage is so contained, there's a lot of behaviours that can happen that are actually forms of sexual harassment. And Sarah was things such as watching porn, like in public on your phone with the volume very loud, or staring at somebody and touching yourself. That is something that is so obviously sexual harassment, but maybe if you were on the street you wouldn't see it or you wouldn't spot it, or you'd be able to exit from it a lot quicker. So we get women reporting things that they say themselves, like, I'm not sure if this is a thing, but I was on a carriage and this didn't happen and I feel really uncomfortable. But maybe that's just that person's privacy, and actually, I'm not meant to hear what they're watching on their phone. There's so many experiences like this where you question yourself. It makes you feel like you don't want to draw attention to it because it could have been nothing.
I mirror that exactly. Interestingly, even though we've had a massive reduction in footfall over the COVID crisis, we still, unfortunately, have had a fairly steady flow of that sort of outrage in public decency, exposure type offences where it doesn't necessarily play into the packed carriages. Really mirrors exactly what we find.
Wow. I mean, the thing about those kinds of environments and those sorts of incidents that are a little bit ambiguous, I do think tube carriages makes it in some ways almost easier because it is ambiguous, and because people who are experiencing it are going to go, oh, did I make that up?
I think it's definitely an environment where people are a lot more opportunistic about it. Maybe somebody wouldn't come up and grab you on the street where they almost know themselves that you're not going to make a big deal, and they can just say, oh, what are you talking about? It's so busy in here. My hand.
They're the instance I would encourage people to report, whether it happens to you or you witness it to another, because it can seem really minor, but actually it's absolutely not acceptable.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but before we go, I just want to ask if anybody has anything that we or anyone watching this can help with, can do. Have you got a petition we can sign? Have you got an action coming up that we can be part of? Can we get involved? Can we volunteer, join a mailing list, that sort of thing? Any calls to action that anyone wants to plug?
From the Transport Police perspective, it's really to use those tech number and to use the internet system and let us know about everything and anything that you're experiencing that's unwanted sexual behaviour or a sexual offence, however minor you think it is. The more we know, the more we can work with, the more we can damp it out, and the more we can hopefully make women and men, of course, feel safe as they're travelling through the network.
In terms of our streets now, I mean, we've got loads going on. We've got our petition, obviously, the one I mentioned at the beginning, that's on our website. In terms of higher education, obviously we have our ambassador scheme, which is up and running, and we're always recruiting new ambassadors. So we have a Google Forms just to signpost you to that. And then we also have a few sort of action points for students to do, like sending a template letter to their provost or dean, and they're all on the website too. And then the Our Streets Now Instagram, I think, is a good place to follow as well. Got lots of information, all the information.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So lovely. So Sarah had an action for us. Ellen had an action for us. Does anybody else want to plug any actions or ways we can help before we go?
Yeah, sure. So I'm always looking for story submissions and people to get involved with the campaign. I'm running a series of FaceTime shoots at the moment. Because of lockdown, can't actually do real life shoots, but it's kind of liberating in a way because it means I can do a photo shoot with someone anywhere in the world, which is great. So yeah, running FaceTime shoots at the moment. I also have a new series of my podcast coming out in April, but I also would encourage anyone to listen to previous episodes if you haven't already. That's all about combating sexual harassment. So please do check it out. It's called the Cheer Up Love podcast.
Yes, and I'll go next because I've also got a little action that everybody could do. If you live in London and use public transport, we would love to hear any and all stories about any sexual harassment experience you had in public transport, be it major or minor. We exist to collect all this data so that we can present a really strong image of what it's like to be a woman in public life. So we want to hear everything. We've had reports going back to the 80s, and those are just as valuable to us as reports from yesterday. When you report to us, you contribute to a really great platform of women. And it's not an individual thing. You get to be a collective. You're a collective call for action. So if anybody does have an incident, it'd be great if they reported it through our website, or you can now actually report to Facebook Messenger, and we will queue it there.
So there is the time. I just want to jump on and say that as a part of our higher education launch this week, we're actually re-releasing a photo campaign we did with Eliza, in which we shared testimonies, and obviously Eliza provided the wonderful visuals of student experiences of public sexual harassment. So we're actually putting this up in a virtual exhibition space. So I encourage everyone to check that out as well.
Wow. I have to say, I'm so excited and encouraged by the momentum right now around this issue. There are so many, all of you and other people who are doing a lot of really great work to kind of share stories and experiences and have a conversation and push for meaningful change from institutions. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say, the Women's Equality Party, we are a political party. We do think that there's a lot of good change that can happen through politics and through legislation, and that's why we're really strongly supporting the Misogyny as a Hate Crime Bill and the Our Streets Now and Plan International UK bill around criminalising public sexual harassment. Feels like there's a lot of momentum. It feels like women are saying, not anymore, no thank you, it's time for this to end. So thank you very much.
Just to support what you were saying about the momentum going, we're doing quite a bit of work with MOPAC at the moment around the existing laws to see if they're fit for purpose, if there's anything else we can explore in relation to that. So there is a lot of work, and I think there is want as well and desire to get this right. The drive behind it now is greater than it's ever been, and it's just refreshing. I think probably long overdue, but certainly refreshing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I feel we could have talked for a lot longer. For me and Christina and Annika and Liv and everyone at the Lambeth Women's Equality Party, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about the work you're doing, but even more we appreciate the work that you're doing because it's fantastic. Keep it up, and let's keep having the conversation and keep working together where we can.